Hi, boys and girls. Today we're reading the BFG, and we're on page 166. We're about to find out what the BFG is eating for breakfast at the royal breakfast. Footmen arrived carrying silver trays with fried eggs, bacon, sausages, and fried potatoes. At this point, Mr. Tibbs suddenly realized that in order to serve the BFG at his 12-foot-high grandfather clock table, he would have to climb to the top of one of the tall stepladders. What's more, he must do it balancing a huge, warm plate on the palm of one hand and holding a gigantic silver coffee pot on the other. A normal man would have flinched at the thought of it, but good butlers never flinch. Up he went, up, up, and up, while the Queen and Sophie watched him with great interest. It is possible they were both secretly hoping he would lose his balance and go crashing to the floor, but good butlers never crash. There's the butler, climbing up the ladder. No hands. And over here, we have Sophie and the Queen watching in wonderment. At the top of the ladder, Mr. Tibbs, balancing like an acrobat, poured the BFG's coffee and placed the enormous plate before him. On the plate there were 8 eggs, 12 sausages, 16 rashers of bacon, and a heap of fried potatoes. "What is this, please, your Magister?" the BFG asked, peering down at the Queen. "He has never eaten anything except snozcumbers before in his life," Sophie explained. "They taste revolting." "They don't seem to have stunted his growth," the Queen said. The BFG grabbed the garden spade and scooped up all the eggs, sausages, and potatoes and bacon in one go, and shoveled them into his enormous mouth. "By goggles!" he cried, "this stuff is making snozcovers taste like Swatchwallop." The Queen glanced up, frowning. Mr. Tibbs looked down at his toes, and his lips moved in silent prayer. That was only one titchy little bite," the BFG said. "Is you having any more of this delicious grubble in your cupboard, Magister?" "Tibbs," the Queen said, showing true regal hospitality, "fetch the gentleman another dozen fried eggs and a dozen sausages." Mr. Tibbs swam out of the room, muttering unspeakable words to himself and wiping his brow with a white handkerchief. The BFG lifted the huge jug and took a swallow. "Ouch!" he cried, blowing a mouthful across the ballroom. "Please, what is this horrible swig pill I is drinking, Magister?" "It's coffee," the Queen told him, "freshly roasted." "Oh, it's filsome," the BFG cried out. "Where is the frobscottle?" "The what?" the Queen asked. "The lumptious fizzy frobscottle," the BFG answered. "Everyone must be drinking frobscottle with breakfast, Magister. Then we can all be whiz-popping happily together afterwards." "What does he mean?" the Queen said, frowning at Sophie. "What is whiz-popping?" Sophie kept a very straight face. "BFG," she said, "there is no frobscottle here, and whiz-popping is strictly forbidden." "What?" cried the BFG. "No frobscottle? No whiz-popping? No glumptious music? No boom-boom-boom?" "Absolutely not," Sophie told him firmly. "If he wants to sing, please don't stop him," the Queen said. "He doesn't want to sing," Sophie said. "He said he wants to make music," the Queen went on. "Shall I send for a violin?" "No, your Majesty," Sophie said. "He's only joking." A sly little smile crossed the BFG's face. "Listen," he said, peering down at Sophie. "If they isn't having any frobscottle here in the palace, I can go whiz-popping perfectly well without it, if I is trying hard enough." Do you remember what whiz-popping is? "No," cried Sophie, "don't. You're not to, I beg you." "Music is very good for the digestion," the Queen said. "When I'm up in Scotland, they play the bagpipes outside the window while I'm eating. You play something." "I has Her Magister's permission," cried the BFG, and all at once he let fly with a whiz-popper that sounded as though a bomb had exploded in the room. The Queen jumped. "Whoopee!" shouted the BFG. "That is better than baglepipes, is it not, Magister?" It took the Queen a few seconds to get over the shock. "I prefer the bagpipes," she said, but she couldn't stop herself smiling. Now, do you know what a whiz-popper is? Do you remember? During the next 20 minutes, a whole relay of footmen were busy hurrying to and fro from the kitchen, carrying third helpings and fourth helpings and fifth helpings of fried eggs and sausages for the ravenous and delighted BFG. When the BFG had consumed his 72nd fried egg, Mr. Tibbs sidled up to the Queen. He bent low from the waist and whispered into her ear, "Chef sends his apologies, Your Majesty, but he says he has no more eggs in the kitchen." "What's wrong with the hens?" the Queen said. "Nothing's wrong with the hens, Your Majesty," Mr. Tibbs whispered. "Then tell them to lay more," the Queen said. She looked up at the BFG. "Have some toast and marmalade while you're waiting," she said to him. "The toast is finished," Mr. Tibbs whispered, "and the chef says that there's no more bread." "Tell him to bake more," the Queen said. While all this was going on, Sophie had been telling the Queen everything, absolutely everything about her visit to Giant Country. The Queen listened, appalled, and then Sophie had finished. The Queen looked up at the BFG, who was sitting high above her. He was now eating a sponge cake. "Big friendly giant," she said, "last night those man-eating brutes came to England. Can you remember where they went the night before?" The BFG put a whole round sponge cake into his mouth and chewed it slowly while he thought about this question. "Your Magister, yes, Magister," he said, "I do think I is remembering where they said they was going the night before last. They was galloping off to Sweden for the Sweden sour taste." "Fetch me a telephone," the Queen commanded. Mr. Tibbs placed the instrument on the table. The Queen lifted the receiver. "Get me the King of Sweden," she said. "Good morning," the Queen said. "Is everything all right in Sweden?" "Everything is terrible," the King of Sweden answered. "There's a panic in the capital. 2 nights ago, 26 of my loyal subjects disappeared. My whole country is in a panic." "Your 26 loyal subjects were all eaten by giants," the Queen said. "Apparently they like the taste of Swedes." "Why do they like the taste of Swedes?" the King asked. "Because the Swedes of Sweden have a sweet and sour taste, so says the BFG," the Queen says. "I don't know what you're talking about," the King said, growing testy. "It's hardly a joking matter when one's loyal subjects are being eaten like popcorn." "They've eaten mine as well," the Queen said. "Who's they, for heaven's sake?" the King asked. "Giants," the Queen said. "Look here," the King said. "Are you feeling all right?" "It's been a rough morning," the Queen said. "First I had a horrid nightmare, then the maid dropped my breakfast, and now I've got a giant on the piano." "You need a doctor, quick," cried the King. "I'll be all right," the Queen said. "I must go now. Thanks for your help." And she replaced the receiver. "Your BFG is right," the Queen said to Sophie. "Those 9 man-eating brutes did go to Sweden." "It's horrible," Sophie said. "Please stop them." "Your Majesty, I'd like to make one more check before I call out the troops," the Queen said. Once more she looked up at the BFG. He was eating doughnuts now, popping them into his mouth 10 at a time like they were peas. "Think hard, BFG," she said. "Where did those horrid giants say they were galloping off to 3 nights ago?" The BFG thought long and hard. "Oh ho!" he cried at last. "Yes, I is remembering." "Where?" asked the Queen. "One was off to Baghdad," the BFG said, "as they is galloping past my cave. Flesh Lump Eater is waving his arms and shouting at me. I is off to Baghdad, and I is going to Baghdad, and Mum and every one of their 10 children as well." Once more the Queen lifted the receiver. "Get me the Lord Mayor of Baghdad," she said. "If they don't have a Lord Mayor, get me the next best thing." In 5 seconds a voice was on the line. "Here is the Sultan of Baghdad speaking," the voice said. "Listen, Sultan," the Queen said. "Did anything unpleasant happen in your city 3 nights ago?" "Every night unpleasant things are happening in Baghdad," the Sultan said. "We are chopping off people's heads like you're chopping parsley." "I've never chopped parsley in my life," the Queen said. "I want to know if anyone has disappeared recently in Baghdad." "Only my uncle, Caliph Harun al-Rashid," the Sultan said. "He disappeared from his bed 3 nights ago, together with his wife and 10 children. "There you is," cried the BFG, whose wonderful ears enabled him to hear what the Sultan was saying to the Queen on the telephone. "Flesh Lump Eater did that one. He went off to Baghdad and Mum and all the little kiddies." The Queen replaced the receiver. "That proves it," she said, looking up at the BFG. "Your story is apparently quite true. Summon the head of the army and the head of the Air Force immediately." We'll stop there. And next time we meet, we'll read about the plan. Have a good evening.